Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Laura opened her eyes that morning feeling the weight of 30 years of marriage on her shoulders. It wasn't that she was unhappy, no, that wasn't it. But something inside her felt quietly dimmed. She got up slowly, as she always did, and walked to the kitchen, where Michael was already sitting at the table, drinking his coffee and reading the news on his phone. "Good morning," she said, pouring herself a cup. "Morning, honey," he replied, without taking his eyes off the screen. It had been like that for years. He'd sit at the table, she'd stand by the counter. A silent ritual. There was no longer that spark in their eyes when they saw each other in the morning. No forehead kiss, no gentle hand touch. It was a solid marriage, built on respect and partnership, but the passion, the lively feeling that makes your heart race, seemed lost somewhere in the past. Laura took a sip of her coffee and glanced at her husband. Time had been generous to him. The gray hair gave him a sophisticated air, his well-groomed beard looked good on him, and he still carried himself with a certain presence. It wasn't about Michael. He wasn't the problem. She was. It was as if her own identity had faded away within that relationship over the years. That was why, a few weeks ago, she made an unexpected decision. She signed up for a gym. At first, it felt strange. She felt out of place among energetic young people and women who looked like they belonged on the covers of fitness magazines. But little by little, she got used to the environment and realized it was good for her, not just for her body, but for her mind. And then she met Ryan. Ryan was the kind of trainer who made everyone feel special. He didn't just give instructions, he cheered you on, smiled, and praised even small victories. "Great job today, Laura. You're getting better every day. Keep it up, I'm proud of you." And Laura, who hadn't heard words like that in years, felt something different. It was a strange, confusing feeling. It wasn't passion, nor was it desire. But it felt good. It felt good to be noticed. And that's how it started. At first, it was just a passing thought. A small spark of excitement in the middle of a monotonous routine. But over time, she realized she looked forward to going to the gym. She chose her clothes more carefully before leaving for her workouts. Without meaning to, she spoke about Ryan at home with more enthusiasm than anything else. And Michael, an attentive and experienced man, noticed. He was never the insecure or jealous type, but he was observant. Something had changed in Laura. There was a brightness in her voice when she talked about working out, a new enthusiasm he hadn't seen in a long time. At first, he tried to ignore it. After all, it was good she was taking care of herself and feeling good. But as the days went by, something began to bother him. Because that brightness, that enthusiasm. He hadn't seen that in her for a long time. Ryan was the kind of person who brought vibrant energy wherever he went. Tall, fit, and always smiling, he had a natural charisma that put people at ease. His relaxed, encouraging manner made the gym feel lighter, especially for those like Laura who were trying to rediscover their bodies and inner strength. From the very first time he corrected Laura's posture in an exercise, with a light touch and a genuine smile, she noticed something different about him. It wasn't a physical attraction, at least not consciously. It was the way he spoke, how he looked people in the eye when talking to them, how he made each person believe they could improve. He knew how to motivate. And he did it for everyone, no exceptions. In the beginning, Laura saw herself as just another name on Ryan's long list of clients. But then came the compliments. Not the common, generic ones, but those that seemed to be said at just the right moment, as if he knew exactly what she needed to hear. "You're stronger than you think, Laura. I bet by next week you'll be ready to increase the weight." It was such a simple thing, almost trivial. But when was the last time someone believed in her like that? Then came the casual moments. A joke about how Mondays should be banned. A comment on how life gets easier once we stop worrying about little imperfections. A quick conversation about a movie he watched and found funny. Everyday stuff, really. But somehow they became part of Laura's day. She realized she liked being at the gym not just for the exercise, but because there, amid the clanking of weights and loud music, she felt seen. She felt lighter. And that's when something in her shifted. That morning, as she got ready for her workout, Laura hesitated in front of the mirror. She picked out a different top than usual, something a bit more form-fitting. Nothing over the top, nothing that would draw too much attention, but still, it was a different choice. On the way to the gym, she noticed she felt anxious. A kind of anticipation she couldn't name. When she arrived, Ryan greeted her with his usual smile. "Good morning, Laura. Ready to sweat today?" She laughed, adjusting her water bottle in her hand. "I think so." The truth was she didn't know if she was ready, not for the workout, but for what was happening inside her. Because at that moment, she realized she liked how she felt when she was there. She liked the way Ryan made her feel. And as much as she knew it was just a silly thought, a little spark of excitement in a 30-year marriage, she couldn't deny it, that little spark was growing. That night, the house was quiet. Only the soft clinking of silverware and the muffled sound of the TV in the living room filled the air while Laura and Michael ate dinner. He was talking about something at work, a problem with a client, but she wasn't really listening. She stirred her food absent-mindedly, not paying much attention. Michael noticed. It wasn't just that night. For weeks, Laura had seemed different. Not a drastic change, but little things that added up to a bigger picture. The way she dressed to go out, how often she talked about the gym, the unexpected enthusiasm she showed for something that, until a few months ago, seemed like a chore. And that name. Ryan. Michael wasn't naive. He understood human nature and knew relationships change over time. But what really bothered him wasn't the possibility of betrayal, it was that Laura was finding somewhere else something she should be finding by his side. He put down his fork, took a deep breath, and asked without beating around the bush, "Do you like him?" Laura froze for a moment. She wasn't expecting that. She looked at her husband, and for the first time in ages, she realized he was really paying attention to her. The question hung in the air. Any wrong answer could hurt them both. She set her silverware down, running her fingers along the edge of her glass, trying to gather her thoughts. There was no point in lying. "It's not about liking him, Michael." Her voice was calm, but it carried something he couldn't quite place. "But being around him makes me feel alive again." Michael's heart tightened. The problem was never Ryan, but what he represented. Laura wasn't in love with another man. She was missing a version of herself that seemed to have disappeared over the years. He leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice firm but not aggressive. "Did you cheat on me?" She let out a sigh, almost a bitter laugh. "He doesn't even realize I exist, at least not like that. He's 15 years younger than me and dating someone his own age." Michael exhaled slowly, feeling an unexpected relief. But that relief came with an even bigger discomfort, the realization that this conversation was a wake-up call. The silence between them was long, but not awkward. It was the kind of silence heavy with meaning. Laura looked away, staring at the table for a moment before going on. "I think," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think for a long time I just stopped feeling interesting. And when someone made me feel different, even without meaning to, I realized how dull I'd become." Michael watched her, feeling a pang in his chest. How had he not noticed this before? When did they stop really seeing each other? They finished dinner, but the food tasted bland. They both knew that conversation had changed something between them. That night, lying next to Laura in bed, Michael stayed awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. He didn't want to lose the woman he loved to an illusion. But more than that, he didn't want her to feel she had to look elsewhere for something she should always have found with him. It was time to do something. Michael woke up before sunrise. He lay there for a few seconds, listening to Laura's calm breathing beside him. He looked at the ceiling in the darkness of the room and felt a stirring inside him. A restlessness. It wasn't anger or sadness, it was a sense of urgency. He kept replaying the conversation from the previous night in his head. Being around him makes me feel alive again. Those words wouldn't leave him alone. Not because they suggested infidelity, but because they showed he had stopped making Laura feel that way. When had he stopped noticing the little things? Stopped giving her compliments? Stopped surprising her? He sighed, running a hand over his face. He needed to take action, but not in desperation or foolish jealousy. It wasn't enough to just say he still loved her. He had to prove it. Over the years, he'd learned that love isn't about grand gestures. At first, yes, everything is intense, passionate letters, fancy dinners, big declarations. But time teaches us that real love is in the details. In the way you look at someone in the morning, the casual kiss while making coffee, how two people can be silent together and still feel complete. And somehow, he'd let those details slip away. That morning, before leaving for work, Michael did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up his phone and sent Laura a simple message, "Good morning, my love. I just thought of you and smiled. Hope you have a great day." Across town, Laura was in her car when her phone buzzed. She parked before looking at the screen and, reading the message, frowned in surprise. Michael never sent messages like that. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. She put her phone away without replying right then. Why was he sending that? Was he trying to make up for last night's conversation? During the day, other little things happened. He called in the afternoon, just to ask how she was doing. He brought home flowers for no special reason. He looked at her intently during dinner, like he was really trying to see her. In the following days, these gestures continued. Nothing overdone, nothing that felt forced. Just small moments that seemed too subtle to be staged, yet strong enough to be felt. On Friday night, when Laura walked into the bedroom to get ready for bed, she found an envelope on the bed. She opened it carefully and found a card inside. "Pack a bag. Tomorrow morning, no questions asked. Just trust me." She blinked, surprised. She went into the living room and saw Michael on the couch, a slight smile on his face. "What's this?" "Something I should have done a long time ago." The next morning, they hit the road without a fixed destination. They drove without rushing, listened to old songs on the radio, and laughed about stories from their past. They stayed at a charming little inn in the middle of nowhere, where time seemed to slow down. Walking on the beach at sunset, Michael took Laura's hand and laced his fingers through hers, just like he used to when they were younger. "You know, I never stopped loving you," he said gently, without fear. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot to remind you of that." Laura stopped and looked at him. There was something different about Michael. He wasn't just the man she had married. He was the man she had first fallen in love with. And for the first time in a long while, she realized she was exactly where she wanted to be. That night, Laura lay next to Michael, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a different kind of peace. It wasn't just comfort. It wasn't just affection. It went deeper, like she could suddenly see everything more clearly. She studied his face while he slept. The signs of time were there, fine lines around his eyes, marks of exhaustion on his forehead. But somehow, he looked younger that night. Maybe because there was something new in his gaze, a spark she hadn't seen in years. Or maybe because, deep down, it wasn't him who had changed. It was her who finally saw what had been there all along. Laura closed her eyes, but sleep came slowly. Her heart was restless, though not with doubt, more with realization. In the days that followed, something in her changed. Not instantly, and not like some dramatic twist in a movie. It was a slow but genuine process. She began noticing things she used to overlook. The way Michael glanced at her out of the corner of his eye while driving. How he'd hold her hand at the simplest moments, as if silently saying, "I'm still here." And then she realized she wasn't thinking about Ryan anymore. He had simply become part of a distant routine. Not because anything bad happened or because Michael was trying to compete with him, but because Laura finally understood what she had really been looking for all along. It wasn't another man's attention. It wasn't the thrill of a fresh start. It was the memory of who she was before the routine and the years made her forget. And she realized she didn't need to start from scratch to find that. She didn't have to leave behind the life she'd built, the home she'd made, the love she'd experienced. She just needed to reignite what had always been there. One night, while they were cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, Laura suddenly took Michael's hand and intertwined her fingers with his. He looked at her, surprised. "Thank you," she said softly. Michael frowned, confused. "For what?" She smiled, and in her eyes was the same light that had shone 30 years ago, when they first fell in love. "For not giving up on me." He didn't answer. He just pulled her into a tight hug, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. And at that moment, without a shadow of a doubt, Laura knew she never needed a new beginning with someone else, only a fresh start with the man who'd always been by her side. The days went by, and what started as a subtle shift turned into a new chapter in Laura and Michael's life. That trip sparked something in them, but it would take more than a romantic weekend. Love needed to be nurtured every day, like a muscle that only grows stronger with consistent training. Then one morning, Michael made a surprising decision. "What if I start working out with you?" he suggested, while they had breakfast. Laura raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You? At the gym?" He laughed. "Hey, I used to be pretty athletic." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "You mean back in college football, 30 years ago?" "Exactly," he replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Maybe it's time I bring that version of me back." Laura shook her head, amused. "Fine, but fair warning, Ryan doesn't go easy." Michael pretended to shiver. "Oh, man, the legendary Ryan. Am I ready to meet him?" That afternoon, he went with her to the gym for the first time. It was a disaster. Michael complained about soreness during the first stretch, made dramatic faces at every exercise, and kept shooting Laura desperate looks after each new set, making her laugh until her stomach hurt. But underneath it all, there was something special. They weren't just working out, they were building a new connection, a new shared routine. And then came the moment Laura would never forget. While Ryan explained a new exercise, Michael watched closely. When the trainer finished, Michael crossed his arms and, with a playful grin, said, "Wow, Ryan, you're so attentive, even I would fall for you." Laura's eyes went wide, and she felt her cheeks heat up. Silence hovered for a second. Then they all burst out laughing. They laughed until they were gasping for air, until the other people in the gym started looking over, until Ryan, who had no idea what was so funny, shrugged and joined in. Right then, Laura realized, their love wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes, what a love story needs isn't an ending, but a new beginning within the same story. And that's exactly what they decided to live together. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.